Do you know a baby boomer? Maybe you are a baby boomer. Or maybe you know somebody or are somebody from the silent generation. And certainly Generation X could use some of this information as well. Well, on this episode, we have three main educators. Two of them are joining us, but all three make up what they call BoomerTECH Adventures. We are going to talk with Ed Brazee, Jill Spencer, how Baby BoomerTECH Adventures started and how they are really leading the charge to make sure that baby boomers and everybody has the skills, the confidence to really embrace and use technology to enhance their lives, as well as build those meaningful connections with their grandchildren, their families, and their communities. So stay tuned as we get started with Ed and Jill. Hello and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host Greg Payne coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Just a quick moment before we get started to remind you that I've got a great course on Grandparents Academy called Being an Intentional Grandfather. And this course is going to be running through the month of July. What's great about this is that there's a video component to this course, and then we're scheduled to have, let's call them Cracker Barrel discussions amongst the grandfathers and the participants to talk about the challenges, the wins, just share this experience about being a grandfather so we can build each other up, that we can make sure that we are being as awesome grandfathers as we possibly can be. So be sure to go to the show notes, find the affiliate link, and sign up today. If you use the bonus code COOL40, you will get 40% off the advertised retail price of this course. So make sure that you check out the show notes and make sure that you check out the affiliate links for the link to sign up for Intentional Grandfathering through Grandparents Academy, as well as finding that code so that you can save some money when you check out. Without further ado, let's jump into this conversation and learn more about BoomerTECH Adventures from Ed and Jill. Hi, Jill. Hi, Ed. Thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm really excited to sit down and talk with you about BoomerTECH Adventures, and I appreciate you spending time, and I know this is going to be really valuable for our listeners, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
As we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves a little bit, give us a little sense of your background, and then we'll get into how we all met up and you guys have started BoomerTECH Adventures. So, Jill, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of background in your story.
Sure. Well, I am at this point a retired educator. I taught middle school, mostly 7th and 8th grade, for over 30 years. And I was, my school was an early adopter of technology. I just remember the first time a kiddo who just found it very difficult to get his ideas from his head to his pen, when I showed him a webbing tool, he just went to town. And so that kind of sold me on the whole process. And then I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Maine had something called Maine Learning Technology program, where started out that every seventh grader and then 8th graders had Apple laptops. It was a one-to-one computing. And so I was on the design team for the state on that, and that was fascinating to watch that roll out. After I left the classroom, I did some writing and I did some consulting with Chris Toy and by myself, and so that was fun. And then eventually, I taught adult ed, with mostly with the people who were boomers and seniors with their technology. But when COVID came in, I decided I really don't like trying to get everybody on board, because the issue was that everybody had a different device and everybody had a different level of expertise, and so I could spend half of the hour just trying to get people on so that we could go on with the presentation of the class. And so now it's basically BoomerTECH Adventures is my main thrust, and still enjoying that. So essentially, I guess I'm still a teacher.
Oh, yeah. Well, I find that a lot of people where they've got teaching in their heart, they're once and always a teacher. Ed, how about you? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. I started out my career as a high school teacher for a couple of years and then saw the light and became a middle school teacher and a middle school advocate. And you can, Greg, you can see something that pulled Jill and I and Chris too, because he was in middle school as well. I spent my last 25 years of my career at the University of Maine as the middle school person, primarily teaching graduate students, practicing teachers who wanted an advanced degree in curriculum and organization and that sort of thing. So I've been retired since, well, I won't even mention that. My wife doesn't like the retirement word. We use the word refocused. So nobody retires anymore. So I was at the University of Maine and doing middle school things. And our third colleague, who is not here, Chris Toy, was a middle school principal. And so Jill and Chris and I worked together, were colleagues and became good friends. And then a few years ago, we sat down and said, you know, there are several things that are kind of pushing us. We were working with a lot of adults in professional development. Jill mentioned the Maine Learning Technology Initiative that we're all involved in here in Maine, and more and more classes were being taught online, and we were all baby boomers ourselves.
Yes.
And we decided we'd put all those three things together, and that was kind of the beginning of BoomerTECH Adventures.
Oh, awesome. I love how it was just kind of a serendipity type of moment, you know, where you're all looking around, you're heading kind of the same way, but then finding each other and organizing to start up this BoomerTECH Adventures.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we work together like on some middle-level institutes, professional organizations, so we knew each other pretty well. In all fairness, it was Ed's idea, brainchild, to work with boomers. And Chris and I just thought, oh, that's a really good idea.
Well, that's primarily because you and Chris you were doing a lot of consulting, and I said when I finished at the university, I loved my career, but I said it's time for some of the younger people to take over, and it just kind of evolved after a while, Greg, and we decided it made sense for us to do something like this.
Oh, sure. A question that I've got for you is, what was driving the idea of sitting down and helping boomers adapt to the technology? Because I almost feel like sometimes as people get out of the workforce, as people kind of are moving on a little bit, that they're leaving some of that behind. But I'm also hearing a little that more and more boomers and Gen Xers, as we're becoming grandparents or heading into retirement, if we want to stay connected to the world, we've got to figure out technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would hear about it in the adult ed classes. People would come and say, you know, I worked with computers on my job, but I always had, if there was a problem, I called IT. And now I'm IT, and I don't know what to do. And I also bet Ed too, friends of a similar age who maybe retired from education before I did, who hadn't been involved with the one-to-one project with laptops, really were not as familiar and were fearful to some degree of working with technology.
You know, Greg, we started several years before the pandemic, obviously, and had done a number of things. Our original idea, the adventures part of BoomerTECH, if technology isn't enough of an adventure in itself, we thought that we live in a beautiful place in Maine with all kinds of neat places to be and to go, the coast and the mountains and the forests and everything. we thought we would, because we, as Jill said, we had had a lot of work with professional development and working with adults in conferences and institutes. We thought that we would kind of replicate that, and we would go to a nice place and run a 2 or 3 or 4 day institute in Bar Harbor, Maine, and feed them lobster and that sort of thing. Well, that wasn't as successful as we originally thought. So we were kind of working on other things. But it's when the pandemic hit, it really brought it home that boomers and seniors and everybody, darn it, really needed to be connected. They needed that connection. And we know what happened over 2.5, 3 years. If they weren't connected, they just weren't on top of it. So that was really an important part, I think.
That need has driven a lot of our work on our webpage, with our blogs and little videos on YouTube. It's really how can we help people feel confident with their device so they can stay connected. They can still contribute to their community, and in many ways still be very creative with the technology involved.
I was just going to say, when adult ed programs that Jill was really involved in, and me a little bit more, when face-to-face activities, courses with the pandemic starting, we fortunately had several video courses that were self-contained, that weren't dependent on us to do a Zoom session every week. And so they were self-contained. People could work on their own. And we have probably, we're at about 20 school districts in Maine that have purchased our courses, our 15 courses: Introduction to Mac, Introduction to iPhone, Introduction to Zoom, and some photography, and a number of other things that we'll talk about later. But those became really popular and really kind of got us going around the state.
Yeah, well, and where I was going to mention too is with the interviews and the people that I'm connected with during the pandemic, there were a number of grandparents where they couldn't go for their annual visits, and they couldn't go. Yeah. And it was a couple of years between when they visited prior to the pandemic and then afterwards, and they had to jump on and learn some of the technology. And I know just even from my generation, and we were talking about some of our previous work experience before the conversation, I grew up too with this idea with computers that, hey, if you push this wrong combination of keys or you do something, like it's going to start smoking and blow up and crash. And they're much more stable. But I think we've all generally have this idea that you can crash a system and you can, do the wrong thing. And they're really not that touchy anymore. But being able to educate and talk to those people and help them out is huge.
Well, just as an example, my sister, who's in her 80s, who lives on the other opposite coast, and both her boys are not near her, and she has friends from college, etc., who she always kept in contact with, phone, etc., etc. So when she learned about Zoom, she was determined to master it. The first couple of sessions were a little iffy, and I'd be on the phone as tech support across the country. But now she runs the Zoom for her garden club, her book club, and a group of friends from Colby College who graduated way back in the early 60s. And she's become quite adept at using Zoom. And then Ed, you did all your church services, didn't you? So to help folks stay connected?
Yeah. Like a lot of churches, as soon as we shut down, I mean, we were on Zoom for about a year and a half, maybe it was 2 years, and it was just us in the back. The first day I remember being up there with my iPhone doing a Facebook Live. And so the pandemic really, I think, forced some people to move along, and certainly people were interested in what we were doing.
I like, too, the idea, and Jill, you're talking about with your sister, but this idea of really empowering boomers and empowering people that haven't had to use technology before or maybe have been scared. Have you found that a little bit across the board with some of the people that you've been working with, that sense of empowerment that, hey, now, like you said, they're off to the races and they're running Zoom calls and they're doing all sorts of things and talking about halo lights and all this kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure Ed has some stories to share too, but I think of friends or clients that I've worked with who texting, they relied on email and the phone. And it took them a while to realize that, especially with the younger generation, unless they were texting, they weren't going to get a response. And again, now this friend happens to be 86. And she was on hiatus during the month of February. And she now takes videos and texts the videos to show, what her situation is like. And she's in contact with all her family. And their other clients do the same thing. They feel very empowered that they can do this. And yes, with a little support, they may need at the beginning, but then they become explorers on their own and try something else. I mean, I didn't teach my friend how to do videos and to attach them to a text. She figured it out once she felt comfortable with texting.
Greg, just a minute ago, you used the word empowering, and I think that's really important because one of the things that all of us try to do in BoomerTECH Adventures is to teach our clients and our friends and relatives, anybody that we're working with, teach them to know how to answer their own questions.
Yes.
So although we have a membership site called BTA Club where people can sign up and work with us every month, and literally give us a call anytime they have a question about any of their technology, what we're really trying to do is to empower people so they can answer their own questions. They know how to ask questions, they know where to search for answers, and they know what to do once they've found some answers.
And you've written a couple of blog posts and articles about that. Here's what you do when you got a question. Here's a couple of things you can do.
Yeah, I like to say that the search function that exists on every app and every website is probably the most important part of that, because they can find all kinds of answers.
That's big. Learning to become self-sufficient in this space is huge.
Yeah. And I think it's particularly important for boomers and seniors, older people who may not have all of us want to have air quotes, a tech guru at our disposal. I sometimes think that the generation down from some of our clients, their kids, are less interested in helping their boomer parents than maybe grandkids who have more interest and certainly more patience and will slow down and help grandparents out. We've noticed that a lot too.
That's interesting because I talked with somebody else on one of my podcasts. I think it was about connecting those long distance grandparents and actually using the grandkids when you're maybe on a visit or a Zoom call or whatnot. Hey, Joey. Hey, Cindy, walk me through how to set up, WhatsApp or set up, something else, and using that as a little bit of a connection point.
And there is a different don't you think there's a different relationship between grandparents and grandkids than parents and children? I mean, all those patterns from childhood still exist with adult children sometimes. By grandchildren, it's a much more positive, I should say positive, but it's a different kind of relationship, I think.
One of the things that Jill has done very well, and we do in writing the blogs on our website for BoomerTECH Adventures, is every once in a while to write an article for specifically for grandparents, and that's what a lot of our boomers are. But to write an article that gives them an inside look at some skills that they might not otherwise know, so that when they go to their grandkids, they can say, "Oh, do you know about this?" And we've had some examples of this, and the grandkids love it. "Oh my gosh, you know how to do that? How do you know that?"
Yeah. One of the fun things is when you use the panoramic feature on your camera, you can, if you play it right, you can start with people, let's say, on the left-hand side, and then as you're slowly panning, those people run behind you and get to the end. And so that the people at the right side and the left side are the same. And most kids they never thought about that. They'd figure it out. So that's one of the things that we would teach people. See what you can show at Thanksgiving dinner and surprise people.
What are some of your most popular courses that you offer?
Jill, talk about your photography.
I was going to say photography. Whenever I did adult ed classes, those would always fill up. People, they know how to point and shoot, but they don't. The new cameras, they have so many features, and that you can do different things, different shots. We tend to deal with Apple, so you've got the portrait mode, and now you can lift an image out of the background. And then when you introduce them to editing and they see that they can fix the exposure or they can chop off unwanted telephone poles, or they can work with the colors, and cropping, of course, is one of the major ones. People get really excited to know that they can take a picture, and even if it is stellar, they can make it stellar with their editing right on their phone or their iPad or their computer. So that's one. The photography ones have been popular.
Yeah, I mentioned intro to iPhone and to some extent intro to Mac, and those kinds of things are important too. Jill is our creator. With a 3-person operation, we all bring different skills, and thank heavens we have Jill Spencer, because she's fantastic. She creates a lot of the videos and a lot of other things. I kind of wonder what Chris and I do, but
you keep.
But seriously, Jill is finishing up a new course that we're very excited about, and I'll let you talk about the accessibility course. Because I think that's going to be very popular and moving us into a bit of a different direction for older people who need some assistance with their technology.
So as we get older, the eyes start to go. Some people are starting to get macular degeneration or glaucoma. It's just part of the aging. And Apple has always been very good. And I say Apple, I'm just not that familiar with Android and PCs. But Apple has been very good about making their devices accessible. And a lot of that goes back to the way they've been used in schools, because the one-to-one project, those computers had to be accessible to everybody, not just the AB students. It had to be available for special ed kids, and that includes hearing and sight, etc. And so they've been kind of in the forefront with accessibility. So if you look at your iPad or your iPhone and even your Mac, there are features that make it easier for people that have sight, hearing, and some motor issues. And so our next course that will come out is all about the different accessibility features related to vision. Everything from how do you do control voiceover, which can go crazy if you don't know which fingers you're using to tap, to how you can magnify, how you can, some people are affected by the motion that is built into the apps, and you can turn that off and make it easier for you to be able to use your device. Eventually, we'll do one on hearing and on motor skills. Got a couple of friends who have had strokes or issues, Parkinson's, and there are some ways that the devices can be made more useful for them, which again, the reason we do it is to keep them connected so that they don't begin to feel isolated, keep their mental health in a good shape because of the connections and being able to contribute to family and community.
As our group, boomers and seniors, get older, as we get older, our focus is changing a bit, obviously, as Jill said, to help them with the issues, not just learning how to use their iPhone to text or to FaceTime or to access the internet, but to be able to do other things, which they really need.
Another thing that people enjoy is, of course, when we were growing up, you used your Kodak Brownie camera to take pictures, or you might have moved on to 35 millimeter. So all of us have shoe boxes full of pictures and or slides. And we've had a phenomenon on our YouTube where Chris Toy, let's see it, it's how to digitize slides, right?
How to digitize slides, yep.
So how to digitize slides. And that just went out of control. It's like we've had, 10,000 hits. Now, if we could get 10,000 hits on all of our videos, we'd be really happy.
Yeah.
But it just, again, shows that there are certain things that people of our generation don't want to lose and know that the digital world can help them keep those memories and also pass information on to family members.
A project that we've talked about, Greg, that we're still kind of in the background just a little bit. I'm thinking about I've got about 4 boxes of slides, Super 8 movies, photographs from the last 100 years from my parents and grandparents sitting on my ping pong table down in the basement. My wife asked me every other week, when are you going to do something with those? I said, well, I can't throw them away because we're going to do something. We maintain that just about every family has those things, and they're dying to know what to do with them and how to put them in some form that can be used. So that's something that we're working on.
I think maybe that needs to be a course by itself. How to digitize.
At least.
Yeah, because we should be all digitizing like wills and property information, just so that the article I read talked about the horrendous floods that have happened, and people lose everything in their house. But if it's in the cloud, whichever cloud you choose, then you still have it. So I haven't thought about that before, but I think that's got to be a course for next fall.
Yeah,
think about how to do that.
Yeah,
I like that.
I would think so, because I did notice that you guys had some information on digitizing family recipes. And so if you got recipes, being able to do some of these Super 8 movies and photographs and things like that ought to be up there too.
That just reminds me of one other thing that we've been working on recently is we're looking at retirement communities here in Maine that are close to us, and we're spread across the state, but where we go in and do a program that around technology, whether it's photography or using slides or movies that people have taken, and then how to use those, show people how to use those, demonstrate that. And then we talk a little bit about BoomerTECH, what we do. But then the best part of it really is what we call just a time to office hours, where people bring in their devices and their questions, and we sit down with them. We did one of these, a month ago down in Rockland, Maine, and people bring in the most crazy kinds of picture frames that are digital picture frames, and work on that. But anyway, that's something else that we've all worked separately in various retirement communities close to where we live, and that's something that is becoming bigger and bigger too, we think.
And a topic that's also important and popular is scams. because everybody, it doesn't matter, texting, email, phone, there's so much out there. I think the older generation, it's a little hard for us to think that somebody is nasty enough to try to steal our money from us or get our, steal our identities. Had a friend who was a victim of one of the grandparent scams where she gets a phone call and it sounds exactly like her grandson, and there's no way to contact him at the point. And she didn't get taken. She did not give over her bank account to this false grandson. But she did go to the police, and they said, oh, all they need now is a snippet of a voice, and they have actors who can create it. Or now we have artificial AI, artificial intelligence, which can recreate a voice from just a snippet. So that's another big topic.
That brings up a good point, too, is because there are some hurdles as far as getting in and trusting technology and then adapting it and being comfortable as a form of communication. When it used to be letter writing, phone calls in person, and then now with the use of AI and the information that's coming out, and a lot of it can be very scary, and a lot of the text messages, the phishing things that go on look really real. And, does that cause some people to retreat back from embracing some of the technology, do you think?
I think so.
I do too. Yeah. Go ahead, Jill.
No, I was just going to say, I had people in classes who, I was explaining social media to them, and they said, nope, I'm very private. It's a level of their comfort with privacy. And of course, once you go online, you lose some of that.
Yeah, I think as people our age, Jill and I are kind of the leading edge baby boomers, born close to 46. And I think as our group goes through, some of the seniors now above us are in that area that Jill's talking about. But I think our group will have had enough background and experience with technology that they'll say, okay, I recognize that there are some risks out there if I'm using a credit card online, or I need to pay attention to scams, but we've got some skills now. We know how to deal with that. And I think that's important.
With the work that you've done with some of the classes, and you've mentioned a little bit of these, what kind of creative uses of technology have you seen some of the students and some of the people you're in contact with kind of take off and start doing?
One of the courses that we put together, one of the school districts asked us to build a course on, this was full on during the pandemic, put together a course on using Zoom to build courses, to build online courses. And we know that was used a lot by a lot of different people. So that was really good. We've got a lot of people using the photography courses. I think that Jill talked about to build a variety of things, slideshows that can be auto-generated on an iPhone and so on.
Yeah, that's photography is the big one. People, I think, figure out things like how to do the calendars or create stuff online by themselves once they feel real comfortable. At least that's been my experience. And so I remember when I was teaching adult ed, I'd offer, of course, well, you want to come learn Canva, which of course is a wonderful website. And I get 2 or 3. Could have been my write-up. You never know. But what people seem most interested in is they really want to fine-tune their skills with their device. They want to be able to problem solve. They want to learn what all these extra features are. And then once they have that, they seem to go off and do things on their own. We we tried to do a workshop on iMovie, and I don't know how familiar you are, but every new iteration of iMovie is just slightly different. So we had, 10 or 15 people there, Ed, do you remember? And they all had different age device. They all had different iterations of iMovie. And so we could show them a slide, but it was, or, do a how-to demonstration, but it was on the iMovie that was on our computer, which was different from almost everybody else's in the room. So after that, we haven't attempted doing a workshop on that. I've been reluctant even to do a video or a blog post or a course on that because, again, it changes so rapidly. If somebody is working on it individually, then, you can work with them. But trying to do a group thing with at least iMovie, and I don't know, some of the other video programs are probably similar situations.
You'd almost have to tell everybody, here's the version, download this, even if you have something different. This is the, version, .1.3.5.
Right.
And come in. Have you noticed that you three have started building up more technical skills than when you started this project?
Oh, yeah. Certainly, one of the things is digital marketing, which, being educators, we had no background in. So we have been learning continually on that. And Ed is the one that keeps pushing us to learn more, to go to the experts. Maybe, Ed, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, educators are not good marketers. We think, oh, you'll actually pay us for that? I think that's probably why BoomerTECH hasn't broken into the Fortune 500 company yet. But that's a good transition to what we're all about. I mean, we really wanted to help older people develop some skills and develop an ability to. We use 3 C's early on and still talk about create, contribute, and communicate. And we really think that's really important. So we're not trying to make a lot of money, but you're absolutely right. I know that we've all learned a lot just about the tech skills. I'm spending, it seems like, half my day I'm Googling or searching for something that I don't know. I'm paying more attention to what's going on in technology. And certainly AI right now is a hot issue that everybody's paying attention to that. One of us that's not with us is especially interested in that area. That's Chris. But it's been really good for me. And I think you hear about boomers are supposed to stay mentally active, and certainly BoomerTECH, Jill, has done that for me.
Yes. This past month, we have a client that is off to Italy pretty soon. And so she's a BTA club member, which means she can have unlimited questions. So her name comes up on my ID, and I think, okay, what are we going to do today? And let's see. Although I had WhatsApp on my phone, I didn't really use it, but she was going to use it. So I learned about that. And then Google Translate, we worked through that together. Skype has changed since when I originally used it, so we had to do research on how you can make phone calls with Skype, and was it free, was it not, etc., to a different country. And so that kind of thing, when people ask you about something that you don't use yourself, then, you got to stretch your brain, you got to download the software or download the app and become conversant with it so that you can explain it to someone else. We have another client, whenever I see her name in a text, I know there's something wrong with the printer. And so learning to troubleshoot printer problems has also been one of the things that I've learned, and which is also good because then it applies, I'll have the same problem on my printer, down the road.
This afternoon, I was working on I was having some tech problems with sound, which was frustrating, but I was working on a short video for a friend of mine who asked me last week, can you read a book from your iPhone or from your iPad? And so he obviously doesn't know how to do that. So I was going to do Cloud Library and connect him to his public library and that sort of thing. But I laugh because I go to church and before the services started, I've had 3 tech questions of things that people need some help with that I need to write down and then get back to them. But I'm much more popular than I used to be, but it's fun.
That's almost like being a doctor in a congregation. As soon as no matter what your specialty is, somebody's going to come up and say, "Hey, I got this little thing with my shoulder. What do you think?"
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that we try to encourage people to do is to think like a 13-year-old. They're not afraid of technology. They know they're not going to blow it up, and they just go and play until they figure it out. Encourage people, look, you're out with your friends, you all have an iPhone or you all have an Android, pull them out after lunch and everybody teach something that they learned or know. And it's another way to build people's confidence, is because when you have to teach something, you really learn it.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about your BTA club and that membership and tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, we've had an active website and an active blog as part of that. We have a YouTube channel that has really taken off in the last couple of years. We've got more than 150 instructional videos on that. And then, of course, we have all the courses. So we had a number of BTA members who used all that kind of information and then said, well, that's great, but what we really want to do is to be able to ask you and contact you either through email or Zoom or a phone call when we have a question, today, not tomorrow, or, we need it right now. And that was the whole idea of the BTA Club as a membership site. And it's kind of taken off a little bit. It's slow. We're getting going with that, but we have some great relationships. Jill mentioned a couple with several people who use us almost, I won't say daily, but at least weekly with things. And and we really think that's some of our other people, after they're with us for a while, will want to go with that.
And along with being able to ask questions, they get a free course every year. Ed sends out a kind of a short newsletter on a regular basis with a tip or something about new information that's coming out. The price is right. It's $5 a month for unlimited questions. So and a free course and though the price may go up. It's been static for a year or two. So,
but we know a number of organizations have started membership sites like that, and we just think it's a logical next step.
Sure,
you can find it on our webpage.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No. I was just going to make the comment of, when you pay for something, you definitely value it more than just having, oh, well, here's a free resource. I'm not going to open that email. I'm not going to open that newsletter. But when you're actually paying for it, you take value of it. How would you suggest that parents and grandchildren help boomers as they start to adopt the technology and start to get in and use their iPhones, use the computers or tablets?
One thing is to ask the boomer or the senior, what is it that you want to be able to do with your phone or your tablet or your computer that you can't do now? Trying to show them everything is just overwhelming, because we know if we don't use something multiple times, and when I taught vocabulary, I said, you got to use this word 15 to 30 times before it becomes yours. And so it's the same thing with technology. I can show you how to text, but if you don't practice it, it's going to be gone next week. And so I think one thing is to find something that the person really wants to be able to do and start with that.
We talked about the different generations and skipping the generation in between sometimes. We talked about that earlier. And I think because young people are so attuned to using their technology. They're very interested. It's not like the olden days of 15 years ago when we talked about your technology on one hand and then your life. Now there's no difference with that. It is for younger kids who have grown up with smartphones, literally, that is their life. And I think it's really important for them to take some responsibility and to work with and help out their grandparents. But it's a two-way street. And I think on from the grandparents' point of view, I think it's really important for them to talk about doing something else besides technology. And I think it's important for grandparents to get kids out and doing things, going for a walk, going for a hike, going for a bike ride, going swimming, playing tennis, whatever that happens to be, and talk about real life outside of our technology. And I think that's something that grandparents could really do well. And I think that their grandkids would listen to them too.
Other areas, I totally agree with that. I just read an article where a teacher said, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. I just want you to talk to one another. And a few kids could, but many of them reached for their device. And he said, no, not your device. And some kids totally withdrew because they didn't know how to have a conversation. So thinking again, what grandparents may need is, so much of our healthcare now is accessed via the internet. My chart, a lot of medical groups use that, where, you make appointments, you see the test results, video conferencing with your doctor. I mean, that's one thing that I think is important. The second thing is when you are working with somebody who is a little fragile with technology, remember the patience is a huge part of it. Don't just whip and do it. Oh, let me do that for you. No. You stop, you make them do the work, but you take it slowly, just like you would in a classroom. And that's real important. I mean, that's what I think, Ed, don't you get comments? Oh, I appreciate that you go slow and you just don't rattle things off like my son does or my daughter does.
Yeah, that's a very typical theme, absolutely. And if we were talking to young adolescents, to young teenagers, one of the things that we talk about all the time would be for them to slow down, have patience, and to try to get at the questions that their grandparents really have. I think that's very important.
Another thing that is not us so much, but we worked with a local library that got a grant, and they created community helpers. They were going to train, and they were mostly retired people. They were going to train people how to help community members with their technology when they came into the library, because most of the libraries, have a bank of computers. And I thought that was a really kind of innovative way of thinking how to help people in the community who maybe don't have easy access to technology. Not everybody can afford it, but the library making that part of their service. And I've also read several articles where different schools are working with having high school kids work with boomers and seniors, training them how to work with boomers and seniors. Again, supporting the community, which I think is really important.
That's great. And I have appreciated this conversation. Jill and Ed, is there anything about BoomerTECH or technology in general that I haven't asked you or we haven't discussed that you would love to bring up?
Our lives are not going to get more simple as far as technology goes. And we just need to support one another. Those folks who are not comfortable with technology, be the support they need. Whether you do it through us, BoomerTECH Adventures, or you do it as a grandchild or a neighbor. Again, technology is growing at a rapid pace. Just think about how AI, ChatGPT came out, 2 months ago, and now it's just exploded. I mean, you can't pick up a newspaper without reading about some issue. And I think that's another place where grandparents can be helpful with grandkids because they've got the wisdom, maybe not about technology, but about life and the decisions we make. And we know that young people sometimes don't make the best, they're impulsive, they don't make the best decisions. And sometimes it's easier for them to talk about issues with grandparents than it is their own parents. And, how can you help your grandchild be intelligent about what they're doing, whether it be with social media, artificial intelligence, etc. I think that's another role that grandparents can play with their grandkids.
Greg, I think, too, we're still dealing with a couple of misconceptions about baby boomers. And that is, number one, that they're not interested in technology. And then the corollary is that they're not tech savvy at all. Neither of those things are true. I mean, the statistics are pretty impressive in terms of the number of baby boomers using technology, how many have moved from the old flip phone to smartphones, and they're using them regularly, are using smart watches and everything else to do a whole variety of things, many of which we've talked about tonight, checking their health and staying in touch with all of that, but looking at financial records online, communicating with people and staying in touch with their family and that sort of thing. So we've still got there's that misconception out there, that whole okay boomer kind of thing, which is really very annoying. And I just started, actually, I downloaded a new book by Dr. Jean Twenge called Generations. And she writes about different generations. And in that book, she talks about boomers and millennials and Gen X and three others, and kind of busts some of the myths for boomers, and saying that a lot of that stuff isn't true.
Yeah, that's certainly, I think we've all fallen into quickly using stereotypes and misconceptions and tropes and things. And even when they're presented as being fun, when you hear it over and over again, it just kind of sinks in as that's the way things are.
Exactly.
So what's the best way that people can connect with BoomerTECH Adventures and start finding out about the YouTube videos and all of this stuff?
Well, we're easy to find. BoomerTECH Adventures, a simple search will find you a lot. That's our website. Do the same thing on YouTube, on Facebook, and our information about our courses that we talked about, the video courses and BTA Club, and all the free resources that we have. Joe, what am I leaving out?
I think that if you go to the website, there's connections to everything there. I mean, we've got a couple of examples of YouTube videos so you can see what they're like. The blog is there, BTA Club is there. So that's the place to start.
BoomerTECH Adventures will get you everywhere, and we're everywhere.
Right. One last thing, it just occurred to me, the one thing about our courses that's pretty unique is that you have access, it's almost like BTA Club. You got a question about something in the course, we give you an email, and you can email us, and we will get back to you. And awful lot of online courses don't provide that service.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to be able to have access to the experts when you have that one question that's just sticking in your mind after you've already looked at the videos and things. And we'll be sure to put the links into the show notes for this episode too. So if folks are out driving around or on a walk or whatever, they can go to the episode show notes and we'll be linked to BoomerTECH Adventures.
You can also find us, our blog posts, and very soon our courses on babyboomer.org, which is another group we are part of.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that group and have enjoyed getting connected with a lot of people on there. So it's been great. And we'll put a link to that as well into the show notes.
Yeah.
So Ed and Jill, I really appreciate you spending this evening with us and telling us about BoomerTECH Adventures and how boomers are adapting and really taking on technology and using it to connect with the world and their grandkids. So once again, just thank you so much for your time and this valuable resource.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it was great fun to talk with you.
It was great talking to Ed and Jill. I really appreciated them taking the time to sit down with us, talk to us about their backgrounds, talk to us about how three main educators, Ed, Jill, and Chris, came together to start helping their community, to start helping making sure that people could experience and use these devices that we all pretty much have to use these days. It was great learning how they've been able to create this resource in this club where for just $5 a month at this point, you get access to the YouTube courses, you get access to them to answer any of your tech needs. So be sure to share this episode with anybody that you know that would enjoy learning more and even signing up for BoomerTECH Adventures. I've got links to sign up and find out more about BoomerTECH Adventures in the show notes. But like Ed said, it's really easy. Just type in BoomerTECH Adventures in any search and you'll be sure to be taken to their site. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.